today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that France's own Olympic gold medalist, Estelle Mosley, has booked herself a fight for later on this month, next week, opposite the ring, Mexico's own experienced veteran, Mossely Rodriguez.
Mossely, who may not have the same ceiling as an Estelle Mosley, but she's already got more rounds in the bank, more pro fights, more pro experience.
She's got that. Now, Estelle sports a professional record of 11 wins with no losses, no draws, one knockout, only one recorded knockout.
This will be her second fight this year.
Mossely Rodriguez, who sports a professional record of 22 wins with 6 losses, 3 draws, 9 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times.
2 times in 31 professional contests, 31 professional bouts.
Mossely, who moves up and down in weight quite a bit, normally campaigns at or around feather, super feather, but opposite the ring, France's own Victoire Pitou.
This was in June of last year. She was up there at super lightweight. Super lightweight, that's 140 pounds. And she won a vacant WBC silver title in that fight.
Oddly enough, she has seen action 2 times since then, but has yet to defend that WBC silver title. She was in action late last year, opposite the ring, Carla Zamora, and she was in action again earlier this year in January, opposite the ring, Marisol Corona.
Not a single one of those fights were at 140 pounds. Not a single one of those fights were a defense of that newly obtained WBC silver title.
The fight with Carla in December of last year was fought just above super featherweight at lightweight, and the fight with Marisol earlier this year, that was down there at super feather.
That's saying that since having won that WBC silver title in the Victoire Pitou fight, Mossely has been moving down in weight.
She's gonna have to move back up for this one, as this fight with Estelle Mosley, it's supposed to be at super lightweight. It's supposed to be at 140 pounds. Not only will Mossely be moving up in weight, but Estelle will as well. Estelle Mosley has been campaigning as a lightweight.
Lightweight, that's 135 pounds. That's where Katie Taylor campaigns as that division's undisputed champion.
It's where Estelle has been campaigning up until this point. She's supposed to be moving up in weight for this fight. You could argue that Estelle Mosley is in fact a naturally bigger woman than Mossely Rodriguez.
But even though Mossely has fought at 140 pounds before, that's not where she normally campaigns.
Both combatants are 30 years of age, 30 years old. Estelle Mosley comes from a decorated amateur background as an amateur, unbeaten as a professional.
She was last in action in February of this year opposite the ring, Anisha Bashil. This will be her second fight of this year, this Mossely Rodriguez fight, and with that, the busiest year she's had in recent memory.
I'd say it is. Estelle Mosley has been fighting approximately once a year for the last 2 years. She only fought once last year and only once the year before that.
Hasn't been that busy.
Barring unforeseen circumstance, illness, or injury, this may turn out to be the busiest year Estelle's had in a long time. If she goes through with this fight and it actually happens later on this month, that leaves her plenty of room to schedule 2 more fights.
She can.
One in the summer months, then perhaps another towards the end of the fall or the beginning of winter. That leaves her plenty of time to get busy.
Feels like she needs to. When you see an Olympic gold medalist like an Estelle Mosley, your expectations are naturally high. And because she's not
the oldest fighter, at 30 years old, she's not the oldest fighter, but she's certainly not the youngest. So you kind of get the sense that she should be a little bit more active.
And her quality of competition could be a little bit better. 1 or 2 respectable scalps. She fought Lucy Wildheart some years ago. That's the same Lucy Wildheart that just stepped in and fought Michaela Mayer this past weekend. She fought Lucy Wildheart, Emma Gongora,
Verena Kaiser, Yanina Lescano. Respectable scalps, respectable, though her matchmaking isn't the most ambitious.
It could be a little bit better, could be worse.
Opposite the ring, Mossely Rodriguez for a WBC silver title in the women's super lightweight division. If Estelle Mosley wins, that's a step in the direction of the winner, Chantel Cameron versus Katie Taylor.
Currently, Chantel's this division's undisputed champion. Katie Taylor means to end her reign.
Become a 2-time undisputed champion. And whether she does or she doesn't, this fight that Estelle Mosley is about to have is a step in the direction of the winner of that fight.
That's what this WBC silver title is a segue to.
Is Estelle Mosley finally ready to challenge for a full-fledged alphabet title? One of the major 4. For a while now, she's been in possession of an IBO title.
We all know that the IBO, God bless them, they're not recognized by the major 4. They're not recognized by the WBA, the WBC, the WBO, or the IBF.
And before you go telling me about how horrible all of those major sanctioning bodies are, need I remind you that the who's who fighters are in their rank standings, not the IBOs.
For all their flaws and all their faults, there is a virtue in pursuing one of those alphabet titles as opposed to the IBO title Estelle's been defending.
I like Estelle's chances opposite the ring Magali Rodriguez. Magali's lost fights to lesser fighters that don't have the amateur background that Estelle Mosley has. She's not the biggest puncher. She's more finesse than ferocity, and I do like her chances in this fight.
Estelle Mosley on points is the logical way to go.
Nothing really jumps out at the screen at you when it comes to Estelle Mosley in action, but she's a fundamentally sound fighter, a well-schooled boxer, and I like her to win this fight on points later on this month. Men's super middleweight news ahead of this upcoming May's Canelo versus Ryder fight. Eddie Hearn says if Canelo doesn't beat Ryder convincingly, you have to start looking at a potential regression.
2021 was a monumental year in the Canelo-Alvarez saga. A dominant year, whereas 2022, last year, not so much.
Lost that decision to Dimitri Bivol, didn't really look himself opposite the ring, Gennady Golovkin. He didn't stop him like most people expected him to, but then again, who stopped Gennady Golovkin?
When has that ever happened?
Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Boxing, which promotes Alvarez, believes an underwhelming performance from his star charge against Ryder could signify a decline in his boxing abilities. Alvarez underwent surgery for an injured hand late last year. May 6th will tell us a lot about Canelo, Hearn said on the DAZN Boxing show. Like, although Ryder is a massive underdog, he will give it 100%. I know him very well. He will give it everything. If Saul's not on it, if Saul's hand is not quite right, if Saul hasn't quite got the hunger, even if he wins, he may not do it convincingly against John Ryder. If he doesn't do that, then you have to start looking at a potential regression. I don't know. Saul's kept a busier schedule than many of his contemporaries, especially in the year of 2021. You have to consider that from late 2020 going into 2021, he was busier than everybody. And he wasn't busy against ham and egg guys. He was busy against champions, starting with unbeaten Callum Smith.
Pit stop to take care of his mandatory in Avni Yildirim.
Quick turnaround to take care of Billy Joe Saunders, and capping off the year with the scalp of then unbeaten Caleb Plant. 3 unbeaten champions, reigning champions, in just 11 months.
Nobody was busier that year. Nobody was busier, that busy, at that level, more so than Canelo Alvarez. Could that explain the lackluster year that followed? Was this guy burned out?
We know he was fighting injured, and we know that he had to have surgery towards the end of last year.
Stress fractures.
He's throwing a lot of punches, and he's punching a lot of faces. Injuries are bound to happen. Canelo Alvarez has something like 60-plus professional bouts, something like that.
He wasn't as prolific last year as he was the year before. He wasn't as busy last year. Perhaps that will result in a more rested, well-rested Canelo Alvarez that has more to give this year.
We'll see. Eddie Hearn continued, if he goes out and he looks great against John Ryder, then all of a sudden he goes into the Bivol fight with confidence, Hearn said. But he's adamant. I honestly could say Saul and I could sit Eddie Reynoso down and go, listen,
Look.
I think this is a bad idea to fight Bivol. You boxed him once at 175 and he won pretty comfortably. His confidence now, they'll tell me to be quiet and just make the fight. They're desperate for the chance at revenge.
We'll see if they get it. They seem to be at an impasse over the weight. Bivol wants it at 168 for Canelo's belts, whereas Canelo, he wants it at 175 for Dimitri's.
Cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, he's got John Ryder in front of him. And in spite of what some of the boo birds are saying, you know,
The usual suspects.
I'm excited about this Canelo versus Ryder fight. I'm excited because of the stylistic matchup. It's just like Eddie Hearn says. The bookies and the odds makers may have John Ryder the massive underdog. They might. But if you know anything about John Ryder, you know that he's going to give it 100%. And you know that John Ryder, he's one of those fighters that's better than advertised. Most people feel he deserved to get a decision in the Callum Smith fight, and he didn't get it.
Though he did give a great account of himself.
He boxed Daniel Jacobs to a close decision win, and he made unbeaten Zach Parker quit.
He's on a hot streak.
Ranked top 10 in the division, top 5 in some rank standings, divisional rank standings, not to be confused with alphabet rank standings, which are often manipulated.
John Ryder is a somebody at this weight. Don't let the boo birds fool you.
John Ryder would easily be one of the best names, if not the best name on Caleb Plant's resume, David Benavidez, a David Morrell, Christian Mabili,
Edgar Berlanga. I don't think Edgar's anywhere near ready for a fight with a guy like John Ryder.
John is better than advertised. A game and crafty southpaw that's going to give it everything he's got. The kind of guy that's going to put Canelo in a position to where you've got to knock this guy out because he's not going to stop coming after you. He's a pressure fighter.
And he's a southpaw, so that makes him trickier than most.
Canelo does have to be up for it. It's just like Eddie Hearn says. It's not enough for Canelo Alvarez to just win. He can always win. He's got to win in good fashion, dominant fashion. He's got to prove that he is head and shoulders above a guy like John Ryder, because that's what he did to all the champions at this weight in 2021. He proved he was head and shoulders above Callum Smith, head and shoulders above Billy Joe Saunders, and head and shoulders above a then unbeaten Caleb Plant. The same Caleb Plant that David Benavidez couldn't stop.
Canelo stopped him.
And his fans didn't have to spend all Sunday morning trying to explain away why he couldn't finish a guy that everybody expected him to finish. They didn't have to do for Canelo what David's fans are now doing for him.
Making excuses.
Interesting dichotomy between Canelo Alvarez and John Ryder, something you don't often see. Canelo's fighting a guy who's eye level to him, where usually he's fighting guys that have a height advantage, a reach advantage.
John's a little stockier than Canelo Alvarez.
Not much taller and not much longer. They're both eye level to each other. You don't often see that, at least not these days, in a Canelo Alvarez fight. Usually, there's a glaring discrepancy in the fighters' sizes.
How that plays out in the ring, at least more often than not, is these taller, longer fighters, their straight punches and their sweeping hooks,
Canelo Alvarez's head movement and upper body movement, it's that much easier for him to navigate around those sweeping hooks and straight shots because he can make himself a very small target, a tricky target.
Save the Bivol fight. Bivol proved to be too tricky for him.
The exception to the majority, but more often than not, opposite the ring fighters that are taller and longer than he is, Canelo Alvarez can prove to be quite tricky, whereas with John, he's eye level to John.
John's eye level to him.
It's a somewhat different dynamic. Creates a situation to where these two guys are going to take each other on head on.
Not much chance of either man catching the other off balance, since they're both eye level to each other and they're short, stumpy fighters that have a lower center of gravity.
Canelo closes the gap on a Callum Smith or a Caleb Plant, guys that are taller than he is. As he closes that gap and they try to give up real estate to create space,
Be a little bit off balance and a little bit flustered.
I don't think that'll be the case with John, though what I imagine will separate them is punching power and accuracy. Shot selection is what I believe is going to win Canelo Alvarez this fight.
I actually think he is going to knock out John Ryder.
Shot selection is why.
Canelo knows what to throw and when to throw it.
It's the kind of thing that you learn over time, the kind of thing that comes with experience and muscle memory.
I think he's going to knock this guy out.
While we're on the subject of Canelo Alvarez, Bob Arum,
He says rival promoters are willing to pay Canelo more than Top Rank and rules out signing Golovkin.
even though there are one or two fights there that they could make for him.
Now, the reason we don't sign Golovkin is he's very expensive, and we husband our money from our ESPN budget because we have so many great fighters that we have to spread the money around to. I like Golovkin. Personally, I think he's a terrific fighter, but again, he's too expensive for us.
It's what I told you guys last week. Gennady Golovkin is approximately, 40, 41 years old? No alphabet titles, no titles. And just to get him out there, it's going to cost somebody a lot of money. So the question is, for paying this guy what you got to pay this guy, can he actually bring it back?
At this age, here and now. Now, Canelo, that's different. He can bring it back.
Arum has long been very interested in signing Alvarez to a fight. He wanted to bring the Alvarez versus Golovkin trilogy to ESPN in 2018. And after Alvarez left Golden Boy Promotions in 2020, Arum has consistently had Alvarez top of mind for all of his stars across 168 and 175 pounds. But as ESPN owner Disney begins the process of cutting 7,000 jobs due to CEO Bob Iger citing preparation for the quote-unquote challenges ahead, Arum remains mindful to work with the budget that he currently has.
I don't want to say, no, we won't work with Alvarez because I look at Canelo as a good friend. When he fights in Las Vegas, he uses our gym, and I'm really friendly with Eddie Reynoso. But I think that other promoters are prepared to pay him more than we are, so I don't contemplate promoting Canelo in the near future, but things could change.
Arum is entertaining the idea of opening up the checkbook to sign Andy Ruiz Jr. for a fight against Tyson Fury, but you have to consider that signing Andy is a lot cheaper than pursuing Canelo.
You pursue Canelo, you're probably in the hole anywhere in between $20, $25 to $40 million, upwards of $40 million every time he gets out there. His fights will burn through your budget. So the question then becomes, what fights can you make for him that will yield a return? And that's where Top Rank comes up short of the mark. They don't have intriguing fights and enticing fights for Canelo Alvarez.
Not because they don't have a great stable. They have a great stable. They just don't have the inside track. They don't have a stronghold, or at least they haven't had a stronghold at middleweight or super middleweight. You know, Matchroom, they had two of the champions at super middleweight, and PBC had the other.
Top Rank had none.
Upstairs at light heavy, they do have Artur Better Beef, but we're not on the eve of a Canelo versus Better Beef fight. Canelo still has Bivol problems.
Right now, we're blessed with so many great young fighters. That's where we're putting our resources. That's not to say if somebody became available and it made sense for us to sign him, we wouldn't sign him. But we have such a talented group. Why would we look to sign other heavyweights when we have a fighter like Jared Anderson, who is ready to break out and go into main event status and so forth? That's not our business. Our business is to develop these young fighters. But once we develop them, to really utilize them and to not necessarily spend resources chasing other fighters. If they come, they come. But I don't want to chase them.
Top Rank arguably has the strongest stable of young fighters. The next generation of elite pound-for-pound talent in the sport of boxing is right there at Top Rank. Fighters like Jared Anderson, who Bob Arum himself mentioned, perhaps Richard Torres, Shakur Stevenson, Shushu Carrington, Keyshawn Davis,
Xander Zayas.
They got a lot of young good guys.
So if you ever found yourself wondering why Top Rank never made more of an effort to sign a Golovkin or a Canelo,
They're fiscally responsible, they are, but also a part of it is they don't have the fights for those fighters, or they didn't.